Hi students, I am Sivaya, lecturer in physics, working in Vignan institutions. In the today's session, I am going to explain the IIT JEE 2020 paper, which is held on 3rd September 2020 in shift 2. Okay? Now, come to the first question. Amount of solar energy received on Earth's surface per unit area per unit time is defined as the solar constant. Dimensions of the solar constant is dash. Here already in the definition, in the question itself, it is given that the solar constant is defined as the solar energy received per unit area per unit time. So we can write S is equal to E by AT. We know the dimensional formula of energy, that is M1 L2 T minus 2. And also we know the dimensional formula for area L2, and also we know the dimensional formula for time T1. So by simplifying, we get it as the dimensional formula of solar constant is M1 L0 T minus 3. So the answer is 1. Okay? So to solve this, we should know the dimensional formula of energy, area and the time. Because here the solar constant is defined itself in the question, it is very easy question. If the solar constant is not defined in the question, we have to recall the concept of the solar constant, then we have a problem. Okay? Next come to the question 2. If a semiconductor photodiode can detect a photon with a maximum wavelength of 400 nanometers, then its band gap energy is dash. Here the Planck's constant H value is given and the speed of the light C value is also given. Now here the photodiode can detect a photon only when the energy of the photon is greater than the energy band gap of the material. That means we know that the energy of the photon is equal to hc by lambda. If lambda is the wavelength, which is given as 400 nanometers, the energy of the photon is given by hc by lambda. This photon can be detected only when the energy is equal to the energy gap of the semiconductor material. So by substituting the H value, C value and lambda value, we get the energy gap value in joules. But here all options are given in electron volts. Then what we have to do? We must change the value from joules to the electron volts. For that we have to divide this value into 1.6 into 10 power minus 19 and you will get the answer in electron volts. But substitution of H value, substitution of C value and substitution of the lambda value, making of the mathematical simplifications takes a lot of time. So to avoid that, while solving the problems in the objective examinations, we use a simplified formula, that is energy gap is equal to 1240 divided by lambda in nanometers, gives the answer value in electron volts. So if you know this formula, by using this formula we can easily determine the energy gap value, and this is equal to 1240 divided by, what is the wavelength value? 400 nanometers. And by simplifying this, we get it as 3.1 electron volts. So the answer is 3, that is 3.1 electron volts. Okay? So substitution of Hc lambda values in this equation and making of mathematical simplifications is somewhat lengthy. For that purpose, while solving the problems in the easiest way, this value is pre-calculated and it is found to be 1240 divided by lambda in nanometers. Okay? If you know this concept, we can easily find out the energy of the photon. Generally this concept is also used in the photoelectric effect concepts and also used in the calculation of the energies of the photons. Now come to the next question. Hydrogen ion and singly ionized helium atom are accelerated from rest through same potential difference. The ratio of final speeds of hydrogen atom, hydrogen and helium ions is dash. Here we have H11 hydrogen ion, and the second one is the singly ionized helium. What it means? So it is ionized, it is also ionized. We know that for hydrogen atom there is only one electron. That's why if it becomes ion, the charge of the hydrogen is equal to only the charge of the electron. In case of the helium, it is singly ionized. That's why its charge is also equal to Q2 is equal to E. Whereas the nucleus of the hydrogen consists of only one nucleon, whereas the nucleus of helium contains 4 nucleons. That's why if mass of the hydrogen is taken as m, then the mass of the helium is taken as 4m. Now these values are given for hydrogen and helium. Now suppose this is the charged particle having a charge q. Suppose it is at rest. The charged particle is accelerated between the 2 points having a potential difference of V0. Due to the potential difference, electric field is created. Due to that electric field, some work is done on the charged particle, and according to the work energy theorem, the work done is always equal to the change in the kinetic energy. Here, initially it starts from rest. That's why if m is the mass of the particle and v is the velocity gained by the particle, the kinetic energy is equal to half m v square. This is equal to work done by the potential difference on the charged particle, that is qv0. Now in this problem we want to determine the ratio of the final speeds. For that, the equation can be written as v is equal to square root of 2q v0 divided by m. Remember here, I used v0 for the potential difference and v for the final velocity of the charged particle. In this equation, 2 is constant and both are accelerated by the same potential difference. v0 is also constant, and in this case, both are having the same charge. That's why q is also constant. That's why the final velocity is inversely proportional to the root of the mass. From this we have v1 by v2 is root of m2 by m1. Here m2 is equal to 4m, m1 is equal to m. By substituting this, we have v1 by v2 is equal to 2. So the ratio of the final speeds is v1 is to v2 is equal to 2 is to 1. So the answer is 4. Now come to the next question. Two resistors 400 ohm and 800 ohm are connected in series across a 6 volts battery. The potential difference measured by a voltmeter of 10 kilo ohm resistance across 400 resistor is close to dash. Here we know that voltmeter is used for the measuring of the potential difference between the 2 points. Generally, the ideal voltmeter has infinity resistance. Whenever it is connected across a resistor, the potential drop across the resistor is voltmeter. But in practice, the voltmeters are having some resistance value. Whenever they are connected across the resistors, the effective resistance of the circuit will be affected. As a result of that, the actual reading shown by the voltmeter is not equal to the exact potential difference between the two ends of the given circuit. Now, for that, see the diagram. In this circuit, it is given that the potential of the battery is equal to 6 volts. Here, 400 ohms and 800 ohms are connected in series. This is 400 ohms and this is 800 ohms. This is the voltmeter whose resistance is given as 10 kilo ohm. Now, due to this resistance, the effective resistance of this part of the circuit is changed. If suppose we calculate the potential difference across the parallel combination of these two, that will give the reading of the voltmeter. That means if we want to find out the reading of the voltmeter, we have to determine the potential difference between the 2 points or the potential difference across the parallel combination. For that, let us assume that a current I starts from the battery. That current I divides into 2 portions, let it be I1 and let it be I2. And again at this point, the 2 currents are combining and the total current I1 plus I2 is passing through the 800 ohms resistance and it comes again to the negative terminal of the battery, right? Now, by seeing this circuit, we can say that the total potential difference applied across the circuit, that is 6 volts, is distributing into 2 parts. One part is across this combination and one part is across this combination. Now, by applying the Kirchhoff's voltage, we can write it as the applied voltage 6 volts is equal to the potential drop across this combination, which is taken as V, which is to be determined, plus the potential drop across the 800 ohm resistance, that is given by the formula V is equal to IR. Here the current is I1 plus I2, the resistance is 800 ohms, that's why we can write it as I1 plus I2 of 800 ohms. Okay, if we know I1, I2 values, we can find out the unknown V value. The measuring of V is our question. Then how to find out I1 value and I2 value? See, in this diagram, the potential difference across these 2 points is equal to V. We know this resistance value, then can you determine I1 value? Yes. From this circuit, we can write I1 is equal to V divided by 400 ohms. Similarly, I2 is equal to V divided by the resistance of the voltmeter, that is 10,000 ohms. Now, substitute this I1 value, I2 value in this equation, it becomes 6 is equal to V plus V by 400 plus V by 10,000 of 800. So, in this equation, except V, all are constant values. Make the mathematical simplification, arrange the terms and obtain the value of V. You will get it as 1.95 volts. Okay, so the answer is 2. So in this question, remember, if the voltmeter is ideal, this entire potential is dropped across only these 2 resistors. But because of the resistance of the voltmeter, the effective resistance of this part is changed. Because of that, the reading measured by the voltmeter is equal to the potential drop across the parallel combination of these 2 resistors. This problem can also be simplified in another way. First of all, this one and this one are in parallel. For that, find out the effective resistance value. For that combination, this is in series and the circuit will be changed like this. Now, using the potential divider principle, directly we can determine the voltage across. The voltage across this is also equal to the reading of the voltmeter. This is another way of the solving of the problem, right? Now, go to the next problem. A calorimeter of water equivalent. What is meant by water equivalent? Water equivalent means thermal capacity MS value. A calorimeter of water equivalent to 20 grams contains 180 grams of the water at 25 degrees centigrade. M grams of steam at 100 degrees centigrade is mixed in it till the temperature of the mixture is 31 degrees centigrade. The value of M is dash. Here, the latent heat of the water is given, the specific heat of the water is also given. Now here, there are three things in the problem. One is the calorimeter, the second one is the water, and the third one is the steam. Calorimeter and water are at 25 degrees centigrade, whereas the steam is at 100 degrees centigrade. That's why the calorimeter and the water, these two are the cold bodies and this is the hot body. These two are mixed up and we are getting a mixture. Here for this calorimeter, the thermal capacity value is given the thermal capacity is equal to 20. Whereas for water, the mass is given that is equal to 180 and its specific heat is given as 1. For steam, the mass is to be determined, but the latent heat of the steam is given as 540. Now, whenever a hot body and a cold body are mixed up, according to the principle of the method of the mixers, the heat lost by the hot body is always equal to heat gained by the cold body. Heat lost by hot body is equal to heat gained by the cold body. Here, the steam is the body. In case of the steam, before it is getting 31 degrees centigrade, two things are occurring. First of all, the steam at 100 degrees centigrade changes into the water at 100 degrees centigrade. After that, the temperature of the water changes from 100 to 31. So, for the change of the state, the amount of the heat lost is equal to m latent heat of the steam plus for the change of the temperature, the heat lost by the body is equal to ms delta T. This is for steam, hot body. This is equal to heat gained by the cold body. For the calorimeter, there is only rise of the temperature. Initially, it is at 25 degrees centigrade. So that the temperature of the is, that's why the heat gained by the calorimeter is equal to ms delta T plus the heat gained by the water is equal to ms delta T water. Now, substitute the given values. The unknown value is only the mass of the steam. This is m into 540 plus m into 1 into from 100 to 31 it changes. So, the difference in the temperature is 69 is equal to the thermal capacity of the calorimeter is given as 20 into the change in the temperature is 6 degrees plus mass of the water is 180, its specific heat is 1 and the change in the temperature is 6. So, simplify the problem for calculation of the m value. So, this is m into 609 is equal to 1200. So, by taking this one to the other side, we have m is equal to 1200 divided by 609 grams. So, if we calculate that value is very close to 2 but less than 2 also. So, but in the problem it is asked that the value of m is close to dash. So, this value is very close to 2 grams. Okay? So, the answer is 2. So, here what is the principle used? Whenever a hot body and a cold body are mixed, the heat lost by the hot body is equal to heat gained by the cold body. For the change of the state, we have to use ml. For change of state, we have to use Q is equal to ml, and for the change of the temperature, we have to use Q is equal to ms delta T. By using these two formulas in mind, by making the mathematical simplifications, we get the unknown value. Come to the next one. A block of mass 1.9 kg is at rest at the edge of a table of height 1 meter. A bullet of mass 0.1 kg collides with the block and sticks to it. If the velocity of the bullet is 20 meters per second in the horizontal direction just before the collision, then the kinetic energy just before the combined system strikes the floor is dash. So, let us see the situation. This is the table and the height of the table is given as h is equal to 1 meter. And there is a block of mass, say m2, and the block is initially at rest. Now here a bullet is fired. Let m1 is the mass of the bullet and it is initially moving with a velocity u1. before hitting the wooden block. It is given that the bullet hits the wooden block and embedded in it. Embedded means they are moving together. Here, if suppose the system is moving with a common velocity, say v, after the collision, after embedding the bullet, so you know that it will be moving in the parabolic path and finally reaches the ground at some other point. Let it be the point A, let it be the point B. In this question, we want to determine the total energy of the body when it reaches the point B on the floor. For that, we have to use the two basic principles of. One is the law of conservation of momentum, and the second one is the law of conservation of energy. First of all, let us note down the data. Here, the mass of the bullet m1 is equal to 0.1 kg. Its initial velocity u1 is equal to 20 meters per second. And the mass of the wooden plank is equal to 1.9 kg. Its initial velocity u2 is equal to 0. And the height of the table h is equal to 1 meter. We want to find out the total energy at this point. This is the question. Now, from the law of conservation of momentum, we can write m1 u1 plus m2 u2 is equal to m1 plus m2 of v. The total momentum before collision is equal to total momentum after collision. From this, the common velocity v is equal to m1 divided by m1 plus m2. Why? Because already u2 is given as 0. That's why this m2 u2 is equal to 0. So substitute the values, it becomes 0.1 into 20 divided by 0.1 into 1.9. So this is equal to 1 meter per second. That means after bullet embedding in the wooden block, the combined system is moving with a velocity v. It is initially at certain height h, so that at this point A, it has both potential energy and the kinetic energy. Now, by applying the law of conservation of energy, from law of conservation of energy, we can say that the total energy at point B is equal to total energy at point A. So we know that at point A, the body has both potential energy and the kinetic energy. That's why potential energy is mgh. Here the mass of the system is equal to m1 plus m2. gh plus the kinetic energy is equal to half mv square, that is m1 plus m2 of v square. Now substitute the values, it becomes 0.1 into 1.9 into 10 into the height is given as 1 meter into 1 plus half into 0.1 plus 1.9 of 1 square. So by simplifying this, we get it as the total energy is equal to 21 joules. Okay, so this problem involves two concepts, so that it is somewhat moderate problem. That too, the values are given for the easily calculations. That's why we can solve the problem within the time. If suppose the values are not given like this, the calculations become somewhat complicated, so it takes a lot of time for the solving in the examinations. Right? First, by using the law of conservation of momentum, we determine the common velocity value. Then by applying the law of conservation of energy, we determine the total energy when the body reaches the floor. Now come to the next one. Here the answer is 4. Now come to the next one. The electric field of a plane electromagnetic wave propagating along the x direction in vacuum is E bar is equal to E naught j cos omega t minus kx. The magnetic field B bar at the moment t is dash, t is equal to 0 is dash. Here the electric field vector is given as E naught j cos omega t minus kx. This cos omega t minus kx indicates that the electromagnetic wave is traveling along the positive x direction. This is the direction of propagation. The direction of the propagation is along the positive x-axis direction. Whereas it is given by E naught j cos omega t minus kx, that means its direction is along the positive y-axis direction. So the direction of the propagation is along the positive x-axis direction, whereas the electric field is varying with time along the positive y-axis direction. We want to find out the magnetic field vector. So for that we have to determine the strength of the magnetic field and also the direction of the magnetic field. For that, what we have to do? Here already the amplitude of the electric field is given. By using that we can determine the magnitude of the electric field by using the formula B naught is equal to E by C. B naught is equal to E naught by C. Here C is the velocity of the light in the vacuum, given by the formula C is equal to 1 by root of mu naught epsilon naught. We know that this is a constant value, but without mentioning the constant value in this problem, here the values are given in terms of the mu naught and epsilon naught. That's why we have to take the C is equal to 1 by root of mu naught epsilon naught, so that we can write it as E naught root of mu naught epsilon naught. Okay, so we obtain the amplitude of the magnetic field. Now we have to find out the direction of the magnetic field. What is the basic principle of the electromagnetic wave? The direction of the propagation, the direction of the electric field and the direction of the magnetic field are always perpendicular to the one another. That's why if suppose E bar is the vector of electric field and B bar is the vector of the magnetic field, and if suppose is the direction of the velocity vector, then B bar, E bar and C bar must be related according to the formula E bar cross B bar. See, this is the direction of the electric field, this is the direction of the magnetic field. The resultant vector of that E bar cross B bar must be perpendicular to the plane containing these two, that must be parallel to the velocity vector C bar. So this is the basic principle to be remembered while determining the direction of the electric field. Here, what is the direction of the E bar? The direction of the E bar is along the y-axis, so the unit vector is equal to j cap cross. We want to find out the direction of the magnetic field. The resultant must be parallel to the direction of the velocity of the propagation, that is along the x-axis. The unit vector is I cap. So in your you studied that this j bar cross k bar is equal to the I cap. That's why the magnetic field vector must be along the k cap direction, that must be along the z axis direction, that in the positive z axis direction. That's why the magnetic field vector can be written as B bar is equal to B naught cos omega t minus kx of k cap. So in this problem it is given that we want to find out the magnetic field vector at time t is equal to 0, substitute t is equal to 0 and substitute B naught value, then we get it as E naught root of mu naught epsilon naught cos kx k cap. We know that cos of minus theta is equal to cos theta. So by substituting equal to 0, we get this. So the answer is 2. So here you have to remember three concepts. One is this one, B naught is equal to E naught by C. The second concept is C is equal to 1 by root of mu naught epsilon naught. The third concept is the cross product of the E bar and V bar must be parallel to the direction of the propagation of the velocity vector. Now come to the next one. A block of mass m is attached to a massless spring is performing oscillatory motion of amplitude A on a frictionless horizontal plane. If half of the mass of the block breaks off when it is passing through its equilibrium point, the amplitude of oscillation for the remaining system becomes Fa. Here without giving the amplitude value, it is given as Fa, then we want to find out the value of F. Okay? So it is also a combination of two concepts. One is the law of conservation of momentum. The second one is the simple harmonic motion. Now let us see the situation where the block is making simple harmonic motion. Let us assume that this is the mean position and the body is making oscillations with the amplitude A, and let us assume that m is the mass of the given block. So in the initial system, let us assume that the amplitude A1 is equal to A and the mass of the body m1 is equal to m, and it is making oscillations with angular velocity omega 1, and when it is crossing the mean position, let the velocity of the body v1 is equal to v. Suppose when the body is at the mean position, half of the mass is removed, then what happened? In the problem it is given that half of the mass of the block breaks off. That means half of the mass is removed from the spring system. Then what happened? The mass connected to the spring is changed, then automatically the angular velocity is changed. Whenever the angular velocity is changed, automatically the velocity of the block is also changed. Then automatically the amplitude of the oscillations is also changed. Okay? In the new system, the mass is equal to half of the original mass. Now we want to determine this new amplitude A2, which is given as F times A. This F is to be calculated. Then what we have to do? First of all, I am going to apply the law of conservation of linear momentum. We know that whenever the body is making oscillations at mean position, the resultant force acting on the system is equal to 0, so that we can apply the law of conservation of momentum. That means the total momentum before braking is equal to the total momentum after braking. Before braking, the mass is m1 and the velocity is v1. That's why momentum is equal to m1 v1 is equal to. After braking, what happened? Only half of the mass is making oscillations and the remaining mass is left free. That's why m2 v2. From this we can write v2 is equal to m1 v1 divided by m2. It is given that m2 is equal to m1 by 2. By substituting that, it becomes v2 is equal to 2v1. Let it be equation number 1. So using the law of conservation of linear momentum, we obtain the velocity of the remaining body attached to the block is equal to 2 times its initial velocity. But already we know that whenever a body is making simple harmonic motion, the velocity of the body v is equal to a omega at the mean position. That too, we know that whenever a body is making oscillations, the angular velocity is given by square root of k by m. Here k is the spring constant, m is the mass of the block attached to the spring. By using this formula, we can determine the velocity of the body at mean position when it is making simple harmonic motion. Now I am going to apply this equation here itself. From this we can write it as a2 root k by m2 is equal to 2 times a1 root k by m1. So k cancelled and we have a2 is equal to 2 of m2 by m1. Already we know that m2 is equal to m by 2. By substituting it becomes A2 is equal to 2 into 1 by root 2, that is equal to root 2 A1. So here A2 is equal to KK cancel, A2 is equal to 2 times root of M2 by M1 times A1. From that, by substituting M2 value, we have A2 is equal to 2 into 1 by root 2 A1. So after calculation, we have A2 is equal to root 2 A1. So this A2 is given as F times A1. By comparing this and this, we have this F is equal to root 2. So the answer is 1. Come to the next problem. A uniform magnetic field B exists in a direction perpendicular to the plane of the square loop made of metal wire. The wire has a diameter of 4 mm and a total length of 30 centimeters. The magnetic field changes with time at a steady rate. dB by dt is equal to 0.032 Tesla second inverse. The induced current in the loop is close to dash. So the resistivity of the material is given, which is equal to 1.23 into 10 to the power of minus 8 ohm meter. Okay. Now let us see that here we have a wire, and that wire is taken in the form of a square loop. The length of the wire is given as 30 centimeters, which is equal to 0.3 meters. Because the wire is bent in the form of a square, the side of the square is equal to L by 4, that is equal to 0.075 meters. Now, for this wire, the diameter is given, the diameter by 2 gives the radius of the wire, which is equal to 2 millimeters, that is equal to 2 into 10 to the power of minus 3 meters. And the resistivity is given. Next, dB by dt value is also given. Now, we want to determine the current passing through the coil when it is placed in the time varying magnetic field. Okay. Now, how to calculate the current value? First of all, for this entire wire, calculate the resistance value by using the formula R is equal to rho L by A. This is equal to rho L divided by pi R square. Here rho is given in the problem, L is given in the problem, and the radius of the wire is also given. By that we can determine the resistance of the given wire, that is rho L by pi R square, from the lesson current electricity. We know that whenever the magnetic field linked with a coil changes, EMF is produced in the coil, and the EMF produced in the coil is given by E is equal to A into dB by dt, which what we studied from the electromagnetic induction. Here A is the area of the coil, dB by dt is the time rate of the change of the magnetic field. The area of the coil is nothing but A square. Why? Because the given shape is in the form of a square loop of side A. That's why loop is equal to A square, and E is equal to A square dB by dt. Here we have the EMF induced in the coil. Here we have the resistance of the given coil wire. Then can we determine the current value? Yes. The current value can be determined by the formula I is equal to E by R. Substitute the EMF value A square dB by dt divided by R is equal to rho L by pi R square. Now, by substituting the given values in this equation, we have A square is equal to 0.075 square into dB by dt is equal to 0.032 divided by rho is equal to 1.2 10 to the power of minus 8. L is 0.3 into 22/7 into r square, that is 2 into 10 to the power of minus 3 whole square. So after making the mathematical simplification for this expression, we get the current passing through the coil. Here the answer is 0.61 amperes after completing the calculation part. Okay, here we use three concepts. One is the calculation of the resistance value. The second one is the calculation of the EMF value. After that, calculation of the current by using the Ohm's law, right? But here the mathematical calculations is somewhat complicated, so that it takes much more time. So in the point calculations, this problem is under the difficulty problem level. Now come to the next one. The radius of nucleus of mass number A can be estimated by the formula R is equal to 1.3 into 10 to the power of minus 15 A power 1/3 meters. It follows that the mass density of the nucleus is of order of dash. We know that the mass of the nucleus is equal to the mass of the each nucleon times the total number of the nucleons. That too, we know that the nucleus is in the form of a sphere. Its volume V is equal to 4/3 pi r cube if r is the radius of the nucleus. Okay? If r is the radius of the nucleus, its volume V is equal to 4/3 pi r cube. If it contains a number of the nucleons, then the total mass of the nucleus is equal to A times mass of the proton. Why? Because the mass of the proton and the mass of the neutron are almost equal, which is taken as the mass of the each nucleon. Now by knowing the mass and volume, can you estimate the density of the nucleus? Yes. The density rho is equal to mass by volume, that is equal to A times mp divided by 4/3 pi. Instead of this r, I am going to substitute the given expression, that is 1.3 into 10 to the power of minus 15 A power 1/3 whole cube. So this is equal to A mp divided by 4 into 3 into pi 1.3 into 10 to the power of minus 15 whole cube. This AA cancels and we have 3 mp divided by 4 pi into 1.5 into 10 to the power of minus 15 whole cube. So by substituting the mass of the proton, and if we make the mathematical simplifications, we get it as 2.3 into 10 to the power of 17 kg per meter cube, which is a constant value for any nucleus. That means the density of the nucleus is independent on the mass number. So it is studied already in the basic +2 level, and it is found to be 2.3 into 10 to the power of 17 kg per meter cube, which is very high value. But here the exact value is not asked in the problem. The mass density of the nucleus is in the order of dash. That is in the order of 10 to the power of 17. So that your answer is 3. Right? Now come to the next one. To raise the temperature of a certain mass of gas by 50 degrees centigrade at a constant pressure, 160 calories of the heat is required. When the same gas is cooled by 100 degrees centigrade at constant volume, 240 calories of the heat is released. How many degrees of the freedom does each molecule of this gas have? So this is from the lesson thermodynamics. Already we know that whenever a gas is heated or cooled at constant pressure, the heat lost by the body or the heat gained by the gas can be calculated by the formula dQp is equal to NCp dt. Here N is the number of the moles, Cp is the specific heat at constant pressure, dt is the change in the temperature. If the temperature rises, it gains the heat. If the temperature falls, it loses the heat energy. Similarly, if the process is the constant volume process, then we can write dqv is equal to ncv dt. Now see what quantities are given in this problem. In this problem, it is given that at a constant pressure, 160 calories of the heat is required. So dqp is equal to 160 calories. And what is the change in the temperature? The change in the temperature is 50 degrees centigrade. Whereas in the second case, when the same gas is cooled by 100 degrees centigrade volume, 240 calories of the heat is released. That means heat lost by the gas dqv is given as 240 calories, and in this case the change of the temperature is given as dt is equal to 100 degrees centigrade. Now substitute this dqp, dqv, dt, dt values in the equations, then we get it as 160 is equal to n cp into 50. Let it be equation number 1. Next, 240 is equal to n cv into 100. Let it be equation number 2. Now let us take equation 1 by 2. So n cancels and we have cp by cv is equal to this 50 cancels 2 times, whereas 0 cancels and 8 2s, 8 3s. So by taking this 2 to that side, we have cp by cv is equal to 4 by 3. So the ratio of the cp to cv is obtained as 4 by 3, which is nothing but gamma of the gas. But already we know that the ratio of the cp to cv is defined as the gamma of the gas, which is equal to 1 plus 2 by f. Here f is the degrees of the freedom. If f is the degrees of the freedom, then gamma of the gas is given by 1 plus 2 by f. Now this 1 plus 2 by f is equal to 4 by 3. By taking this one to that side and by taking that quantity to this side and f to that side, we have f is equal to 6. So the number of the degrees of the freedom, f is equal to 6 for the given gas. So the answer is 2. Here we should know the formulas for the heat lost or heat gained by the gas at a constant pressure and at a constant volume. By that we determine the ratio of the Cp/Cv values. After that we determine the number of the degrees of the freedom, F value. Come to the next one. A metallic sphere cools from 50 degrees centigrade to 40 degrees centigrade in 300 seconds. So it cools from 50 degrees centigrade to 40 degrees centigrade in a time of 300 seconds, which is equal to 5 minutes. The temperature of the surroundings is given as temperature of the surroundings is equal to 20 degrees centigrade. Now the temperature of the sphere after next 5 minutes will be dash. That means if the body cools from 40 degrees centigrade to what temperature after 5 more minutes? This is the question. That means in the first 5 minutes its temperature changes from 50 to 40. In the next 5 minutes from 40 to what temperature the temperature changes? That is our question. So this is from the transmission of the heat lesson under the concept of the Newton's law of the cooling. We know that whenever a body cools, according to the Newton's law of cooling, we can write it as d theta by dt is equal to minus k of Tb minus Ts. Here d theta is the fall in the temperature, dt is the time taken for that fall, k is the constant value, Tb is the average temperature of the body and Ts is the temperature of the surroundings. Now let us apply this Newton's law of the cooling 2 times for the 2 given cases. So by applying the conditions of the first case, what we get? What is the d theta? It changes from 50 to 40. That's why d theta is equal to 50 minus 40 divided by how much time it takes? It takes 5 minutes is equal to minus k of what is Tb? This Tb is the average temperature of the body. Its initial temperature is 50, final temperature is 40, so that the average temperature is equal to 50 plus 40 by 2 minus the temperature of the surroundings is 20. This is the equation for the given case 1. Similarly, apply the conditions of the case 2, then we get it as 50. So it changes from 40 to unknown temperature, so that 40 minus, let the unknown temperature is taken as a T, divided by, the time is also given after 5 minutes. So 40 minus T by 5 is equal to minus K of 40 plus T by 2 minus 20. Let it be equation number 2. So if we take equation 1 by 2, this minus k cancelled, 5 cancelled, and it becomes 50 minus 40, 10 divided by 40 minus T is equal to 50 plus 40 by 2 is equal to 45 minus 20. 45 minus 20 is equal to 25 divided by taking LCM for this, it becomes 40 plus T minus 40 by 2, that is equal to T by 2. So make it cross multiplication, and after simplification we get it as the unknown temperature T is equal to 100 by 3. So this is equal to 33.3 degrees centigrade. Now the answer is to be determined close to the given options. So that is close to 33 degrees. That's why your answer is 1. Here we apply the Newton's law of cooling. Remember, sometimes while solving the problems, the exact answers may not be given in the options. In such cases, this word will be close to is mentioned. In such cases, which value in the given options is close to the exact value, see that carefully and choose that option as your right answer. Now come to the next problem. Which of the following will not be observed when a multimeter operating in the resistance measuring mode, probes connected across a component are just reversed? Here we have a multimeter. That multimeter is first connected across a resistor, then it is connected across a metal wire, and in the third case it is connected across a capacitor, and in the fourth case it is connected across LED. Here, this is a theoretical question. For this the answer is 3. Come to the next question. Here, concentric hollow spheres of radii R and 4R hold charges Q1 and Q2 respectively. Given that surface charge densities of the concentric spheres are equal, the potential difference VR minus V4R is dash. Here there are two concentric spheres. Q1, Q2 are the charges present on the concentric spheres. R and 4R are the radius of the two spheres. In this problem, we want to determine the potential difference between VA and VB. For that, let us see the concept. Here, in case of a charged hollow sphere, the potential at a point outside the sphere is given by V is equal to Q by 4 pi epsilon naught R. Here, R is the distance of the point. For the simplicity, we can also write it as V out is equal to K Q divided by R. Here this K is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. On the surface of the sphere, the potential is given by V surface is equal to q by 4 pi epsilon naught r, so that we can write it as Vs is equal to kq divided by r. So inside the sphere, the potential is equal to the potential on the surface, that is equal to q by 4 pi epsilon naught r, so that V in is equal to k times q by r. So using these three formulas, I am going to calculate the potential of the first sphere, the potential of the second sphere, then we are going to calculate the potential difference. First come to the potential of the sphere A is equal to the potential due to the charges present on the surface of the sphere A, which is equal to kq1 divided by the radius is r, plus the potential due to the second sphere having a charge q2, for that the potential is given by kq2 divided by 4r. Why? Because this point is locating inside for the second sphere, the potential on the surface and inside the sphere are same, so that is equal to kq2 divided by 4r. So from that we have Vi is equal to kq1 by r plus kq2 divided by 4r. Similarly, find out the potential on the surface of the sphere of B, equal to potential due to the charge on the inner sphere. So from the center of the inner sphere, the outer sphere is at a distance of 4r, that's why Vb is equal to kq1 divided by 4r plus the potential due to the charge present on the outer sphere, that is equal to kq2 divided by 4r. Okay, we calculate the potential of the inner sphere and outer of the sphere, then the difference is given by Va minus Vb is equal to, substitute these two equations, kq2 by 4 are cancelled and we have kq1 by r minus kq2 divided by 4r. So this is equal to 3kq1 divided by, but already we know that this k is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. By substituting that value, we have 3 into 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught q1 divided by 4r. So by simplifying that, we have the potential difference Va minus Vb is equal to 3q1 divided by 16 pi epsilon naught r. So that is given in the answer 4. Next come to the another problem. The mass density of a planet of radius r varies with the distance r from its center as rho r is equal to rho naught 1 minus r square by r square. Then the gravitational field is maximum at dash. Here, let us assume the planet. Let O is the center. Suppose we want to find out the gravitational field intensity value, let it be E at a distance r from the center. For that, we should know the mass of the planet inside this sphere. Mass of the planet inside the sphere. Here the density is varying with the distance, that's why the mass of the planet inside that region can be determined by using the concept of the integration. For that, the sphere is dividing into concentric spherical shells. In that concentric spherical shells, let us consider one shell at a distance r whose thickness is equal to dr. Now, first of all, I am going to calculate the mass of the spherical shell. The mass of the spherical shell is given by dm is equal to dv times the density. We know that the mass of the spherical shell is equal to dv times rho. This volume of the spherical shell is equal to 4 pi r square times dr into rho is equal to rho naught 1 minus r square by r square. So by making simplification, we have dm is equal to 4 pi rho naught of r square minus r to the power of 4 by r square dr. Let it be equation number 1. By knowing the mass of this spherical shell, the mass of the planet inside the spherical region can be determined by making the concept of the integration, that is m is equal to integral dm between the to r. By substituting this dm value and after making calculation, we have 4 pi rho naught r cube by 3 minus r to the power of 5 divided by 5r square. So this is the value what we get after making the integration and after substituting the limits. So this is the mass of the spherical region. By knowing the mass of the spherical region, we can determine the gravitational field at that point by using the formula E is equal to gm by r square. So already we know the mass. From that we have E is equal to g 4 pi rho naught r cube by 3 minus r to the power of 5r square divided by r square. Okay. Now this is equal to 4 pi g rho naught into r by 3 minus r cube by 5r square. This is the intensity value. So the intensity E is equal to 4 pi g rho naught, 4 pi g rho naught times r by 3 minus r cube by 5r square. What is it? That is E is equal to 4 pi g rho naught r by 3 minus r cube divided by 5r square. This is the value what we obtained, that is E is equal to 4 pi g rho naught times r by 3 minus r cube by 5r square. But in this problem we want to determine the position where the gravitational field is 0. That condition can be obtained by using the maximum minima what you studied in the mathematics. That is, if dE by dr is equal to 0, then we get the condition of the maxima. So by differentiating this equation, we have 4 pi g rho naught. By taking the differentiation, it becomes 1 by 3 minus 3r square by 5r square to 0. By taking this one to that side, we have 1 by 3 minus 3r square, 1 by 3 minus 3r square by 5r square is equal to 0. From this we have 3r square by 5r square is equal to 1 by 3. From this we have r square is equal to 5 by 9 r square. From this we have r is equal to root 5 by 9 r square, root 5 by 9 r. So your answer is 3, which is equal to root 5 by 9 r. So the options are given in the previous slide. So the option is 3. Now come to the another problem. Two sources of light emit X-rays wavelength 1 nanometer and visible light of wavelength 500 nanometers. This is source 1, this is source 2. For the source 1, the wavelength of radiation is 1 nanometer. For the source 2, the wavelength of emitted radiation is 500 nanometers. Both these sources emit light of same power 200 watts. The power of the source is given as P is equal to 200 watts, which is same for the two sources. The ratio of the number density of photons of X-rays to the number density of photons of the visible light of the given wavelength is dash. If suppose this is the source which is emitting the light radiation by means of the photons, let us assume that it emits n photons in t seconds, whose wavelength is lambda, then the power of the source can be determined by the formula P is equal to total energy emitted divided by the time, which is equal to NE by T. Here E is the energy of the each photon, which is equal to hc by lambda, so that the power of the source P is equal to N by T times hc by lambda. This N by T gives the number of the photons emitted in 1 second. Number of the photons in 1 second here, which is mentioned as the number density of the photons. So from this equation we can write the power P is equal to N hc by lambda. N is the number density, h is the Planck's constant, c is the velocity of the light, and lambda is the wavelength of the radiation emitted from the source. In the problem it is given that the power of the two sources are same. It means P1 is equal to P2. So by substituting the values we have N1 hc divided by lambda 1 is equal to N2 hc divided by lambda 2. hc gets cancelled and we have N1 by N2 is equal to lambda 1 by lambda 2, that is equal to 1 by 500. Okay, so the answer is 2. Now come to a particle is moving unidirectional on a horizontal plane under the action of a constant power supplying energy source. The displacement time graph that describes the motion of the particle is dash. Suppose here we have a particle and that particle is moving under the application of a constant power P. If suppose V is the velocity of the body after time t seconds. Now, whenever we apply the constant power, force is applying at the constant rate. Because of that, the speed of the body is also gradually increasing at constant rate. In that case, by using the work energy theorem, we have the work is equal to change in the kinetic energy. From this, we can write it as power into time is equal to half mv square if the initial velocity of the body is equal to 0. From this, the velocity gained by the body v is equal to square root of 2 pt by m. This is the relation between the velocity and the time. But here, the graph is given between the displacement versus time. That's why this velocity can be written as rate of displacement ds by dt. From that, we have ds by dt is equal to square root of 2 pt by m. By taking dt to that side, we have ds is equal to square root of 2 pt by m dt. So by making the integration between the suitable limits, we have s is equal to root 2p by m is constant. Root 2p by m is constant, and for root 2 the differentiation is t power 3 by 2. So from this we can write s is proportional to t power 3 by 2. So it is having increasing of the slope, so that in these 4 graphs, this third one gives the exact relation between the displacement versus the time. So that your answer is 3. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. So this graph gives the exact variation of the displacement versus time. Now come to the next problem. A uniform rod of length L are pivoted at one of its ends on a vertical shaft of negligible radius. This is the shaft, so this is the rod, it is pivoted, and the shaft rotates at an angular speed of omega. The rod makes an angle theta with it. This angle is given, this is theta. To find the theta, equate the rate of change of angular momentum. You know that the rate of change of angular momentum is nothing but the torque, and the torque is given as this. So without mentioning as torque directly in the problem, it is mentioned as the rate of change of angular momentum. That rate of change of angular momentum is nothing but ml square by 12 omega square sin theta cos theta about the center of mass. Now, by equating this to the torque provided by the horizontal and the vertical forces Fh and Fv about the center of mass, the value of theta is then such that dash. Okay? Here to calculate theta value, torques are calculated in two cases. First case, the rate of change of angular momentum is calculated. In the second case, torque due to the horizontal force and the vertical force are calculated, and by equating the two torques, the theta value is calculated in the problem. For that, let us see the problem. Here, let us assume the center of mass of the rod at point A. Let O is the point at which the rod is attached to the shaft. Theta is the angle made by the rod with the shaft. Now, it is rotating with the angular velocity omega. Because of that, forces are acting on the rod. The first one is the vertical force, which is nothing but the gravitational force mg acting downwards. The second one is the horizontal force, which is nothing but the centrifugal force acting away from the center, that is equal to mr omega square. Okay? Now we have to calculate the torque due to the weight and also torque due to the centrifugal force. For that, let it be the point B. See, here there is a right angle triangle. From this right angle triangle, what can we write? OB is equal to this side, that is equal to L by 2 cos theta, and this side BA is equal to L by 2 sin theta. Now first calculate the torque due to the vertical force, that is the torque due to the weight of the body is given by is equal to force into perpendicular distance. What is force value? mg into what is the perpendicular distance of that force from the shaft? The perpendicular distance is equal to BA, that is equal to mg. BA is equal to L by 2 sin theta. Now, if only this one is acting, the rod rotates in the clockwise direction, so that this is the clockwise torque. Now, calculate the torque due to the centrifugal force, that is tau mr omega square. That is given by mr square into perpendicular distance. What is the perpendicular distance from the point? The perpendicular distance is equal to OB, and already we know that OB value, that is equal to L by 2 cos theta. As the body is rotating, here the radius of the circle is equal to AB value. By substituting R value and OB value in this equation, it becomes m L by 2 sin theta omega square into L by 2 cos theta. This is equal to m L square by 4 omega square sin theta cos theta. Now, if only this force is acting, the rod will be rotating in the anti-clockwise direction. That's why this is acting in the clockwise direction, this is acting in the anti-clockwise direction, so that the effective torque is given this one minus this one, that is mb L by 2 sin theta minus m L square by 4 omega square sin theta cos theta. And in the problem it is given that this torque is equated to the given torque. Now let us equate this torque to this torque, take this term to that side, and let us take the mathematical simplifications. After making the mathematical simplifications, we get the cos theta value, and that cos theta is found to be 3g divided by 2l omega square. Okay? It needs some mathematical simplification. Do that mathematical simplification. So equate this one with this one and let us calculate the cos theta value. Now come to the next one. A perfectly diamagnetic sphere has a small spherical cavity at its center, which is a magnetic substance. The whole system is placed in a uniform magnetic field B bar. Then the field inside the paramagnetic substance is dash. See here, there is a diamagnetic spherical shell. Inside that, a paramagnetic substance is placed at the center. Now, uniform magnetic field is applied on it. Already we know that whenever a diamagnetic substance is placed inside the magnetic field, we know that the magnetic lines of force are expelled out like this, but not passing through the specimen. So, the lines are expelled out through the diamagnetic substance. That's why no lines of force are entering into the diamagnetic substance, so that inside the diamagnetic substance, the paramagnetic substance is placed. Even though the paramagnetic substance is placed, the resultant magnetic field inside that one is equal to 0. Why? Because of that, the magnetic field is the diamagnetic substance. So the answer is 4. The resultant magnetic field inside the substance is equal to 0. Now come to the next one. A block starts moving up an inclined plane of inclination 30 degrees with an initial velocity of v0. It comes back to its initial position with a velocity v0 by 2. The value of the coefficient of kinetic friction between the block and the inclined plane is close to x by 100. The nearest integer to x is dash. See here, in the beginning, we have inclined plane of inclination theta on which a body is placed. It is moving up with a velocity v0, and so the body comes to rest after traveling through some distance, say s. Now, when the body is moving upwards, we know that mg sin theta is acting downwards and the friction is also acting downwards. So that the acceleration of the body is given by a is equal to g of sin theta plus mu cos theta when the body moves up. Now, by applying the formula v square minus u square is equal to 2as between the points a and b, we have, by applying the v square minus u square is equal to 2as, we have 0 minus v0 square is equal to 2 into, here the body is moving upwards, the forces are acting downwards, so that the body has a deceleration. That's why minus g of sin theta plus mu cos theta into s. So from this we have v0 square is equal to 2gs sin theta plus mu cos theta. Let it be equation number 1. In the second case, the body is coming downwards from the top. That means it is moving from point B to point A. As the body reaches the point A, it has a velocity v0 by 2. Okay? Already we know that as the body is coming downwards, mg sin theta is acting downwards, whereas the friction is acting upwards. So that for the body moving downwards, the acceleration is given by a is equal to g of sin theta minus mu cos theta. So by applying the equation v square minus u square is equal to 2as, again we have v0 square by 4 is equal to 2gs sin theta minus mu cos theta. Let it be equation number 2. By taking 1 by 2, v0, 2gs cancelled, and we have 4 is equal to sin theta plus mu cos theta divided by sin theta minus mu cos theta. So by making the cross multiplication and rearranging the terms, we get the mu value. That mu value is equal to 3 by 5 tan theta. So in the problem, theta value is given, that is equal to 30 degrees. So 3 by 5 tan 30. We know that tan 30 is equal to 1 by root 3. 3 by 5 into 1 by root 3, that is equal to root 3 by 5. We know that root 3 is equal to 1.732 divided by 5, that is equal to 0.3464. But in the problem it is given that mu is equal to n by 1000. We want to find out that n value. Let us equate that value to this value. We have n by 1000 is equal to 0.3464. From that we have n is equal to 0.3464 into 1000 equal to 346.4. So the nearest integer value is 346. Okay. Come to the next one. When an object is kept at a distance of 30 cm from a concave mirror, the image is formed at a distance of 10 cm from the mirror. If the object is moved with a speed of 9 cm per second, the speed is dash. So object distance is given as 30 centimeters and the image distance is given as 10 centimeters. Now here the speed of the object is given, that is du by dt is given as 9 centimeter per second. We want to find out the speed of the image. Already we know the mirror equation, that is 1 by u plus 1 by v equal to 1 by f. By making differentiation with respect to time, we have 1 by minus 1 by u square du by dt minus 1 by v square dv by dt is equal to f. Why? Because f is the focal length, which is a constant. So that we have dv by dt is equal to minus of v square by u square into du by dt. So if we take the magnitude of the velocities, we have dv by dt is equal to, which is the velocity of the image, is equal to, what is v square? V is given as 10, so 10 square by u is given as 30 square into the object is given as 9. So by making simplification, we have 1 centimeter per second. Okay. Now see the next question. The minimum possible work is done by a refrigerator in converting 100 grams of water at 0 degrees centigrade to ice. How much heat in calories is released to the surroundings at temperature 27 degrees centigrade? Here latent heat of ice is given and we have to measure the value to the nearest integer. So let us see the screen. This is the refrigerator. This is the sink, which is at a low temperature, and this is the source, which is at a high temperature. Let T2 and T1 are the temperature of the sink and the source. Here you know the working of the refrigerator. The refrigerator takes Q2 amount of the heat energy from the sink. Doing W amount of the work, Q1 amount of the energy is transferred to the surroundings. Okay. For this refrigerator, we can define one parameter, that is the coefficient of performance, beta. And the coefficient of performance is defined as beta is equal to Q2 by W. Here Q2 is the amount of the heat absorbed from the lower temperature sink and W is the amount of the work done by the refrigerator. So in terms of the temperature, this can also be written as beta is equal to T2 by T1 minus T2. Here T1, T2 values must be taken on the absolute scale or Kelvin scale. Correct? Now in this problem, the temperature of the sink is given as T2 is equal to how much? It has water at 0 degree centigrade. So T2 is equal to 0 degree centigrade, that is equal to 273 Kelvin. And the temperature of the source is T1 is equal to the temperature of the surroundings at 27 degrees centigrade, that is equal to 300 Kelvin. Now the coefficient of the performance beta is equal to T2 by T1 minus T2, that is equal to 273 divided by 300 minus 273, that is given by beta is equal to 273 divided by 27. Let it be equation number 1. So here what is the functioning of the refrigerator? It has to change the 100 grams of water at 0 degree centigrade to the ice. Already we know that the amount of the heat energy taken out to convert the water into the ice is given by Q is equal to M latent heat of the ice. This is nothing but the heat taken by the refrigerator, so that this is Q2, this is equal to 100 into 80 calories. Now by knowing this Q2 value and beta value, we can determine the work done value. Therefore, the work done is equal to Q2 by beta. Q2 by beta, this is equal to 100 into 80 divided by beta is equal to 273 by 27. So 273 into 27. Now here we have Q2 value and here we have work value. By knowing this Q2 value and work value, we can determine the amount of the heat transferred to the source by using the formula Q1 is equal to Q2 plus W. So this is equal to 100 into 80 plus 100 into 80 into 27 divided by 273. Now by making the mathematical calculations, we get it as 8792.1 like that. So the nearest integer is 8791. This is 8791.2. So the nearest integer value is 8791. Okay. This is the total amount of the heat energy transferred by the refrigerator to the surroundings. Now come to the next problem. A massless equilateral triangle EFG of side A, as shown in the figure, has 3 particles of masses m situated at its vertices. The moment of inertia of the given system about the line EX perpendicular to the EZ in the plane of EFG. So this is the EZ line. This axis is perpendicular to this EZ line and lying in the plane of the EFG. About this axis, we want to determine the moment of inertia. Here, 3 particles are located at the 3 vertices of the triangle whose masses are m, m, m. Now, the coordinates of the first mass is 0, 0, whereas the coordinates of this mass is a, 0, and the coordinates of this mass is a by 2, root 3 a by 2. Now by the definition, the moment of inertia is given by moment of inertia is equal to mass into square of the perpendicular distance. Mass into square of the perpendicular distance from the axis. Now the total moment of inertia of the system is given by I is equal to sum of the moment of inertia of the individual particles, that is I1 plus I2 plus I3. Here the mass of the first particle is equal to m and its distance from the axis is 0. plus the mass of the second particle is also equal to m, and its perpendicular distance is equal to a, so m a square, plus the mass of the third particle is equal to m, and its perpendicular distance is equal to a by 2 from the axis, so that this is m a by 2 whole square. So this is equal to m a square plus m a square by 4, which is given by I is equal to 5 by 4 m a square. But in the problem, the moment of inertia of the system is given as n by 20 m a square. In that equation, we have to find out n value. So that equate this obtained value to the given value, that is 5 by 4 m a square is equal to n by 20 m a square. Here m a square cancelled, and we have n is equal to 5 into 20 divided by 4, that is equal to 25. Okay? So here we calculate the moment of inertia of the system, and by equating the obtained value with the given value, we find out the integer n value, that is 25. Okay? So the answer is 25. Now come to the next and last problem. A galvanometer coil has 500 turns, and each turn has an average area of 3 into 10 to the power of minus 4 meters square. If a torque of 1.5 Newton is required to keep this coil parallel to the magnetic field, when a current of 0.5 ampere is flowing through it, the strength of the field in Tesla is dash. Here what is given? The coil has 500 turns, and the average area of the each coil is given by 3 into 10 to the power of minus 4 meter square, and the torque acting on the coil is given by tau is equal to 1.5 Newton meter, and a current of 0.5 amperes is flowing through the coil, so I is equal to 0.5 amperes. And how it is placed? If a torque of 1.5 Newton is required to keep this coil parallel to the magnetic field, that means if suppose this is the magnetic field, then the coil is placed parallel to the magnetic field like this. Whenever the coil is placed parallel to the magnetic field, the angle between the area vector and the magnetic field vector is given by theta is equal to 90 degrees. Now, the angle between the area vector and the magnetic field vector in this case is given by 90 degrees. So, theta is equal to 90 degrees. Already we know that the torque acting on the coil placed in the magnetic field is given by tau is equal to NIAB sin theta. Here all values are given for us, and we want to determine the B value. Further substitute the values. 1.5 is equal to 500 into 0.5 into 3 into 10 to the power of minus 4 into B is unknown, sin 90. We know that sin 90 is equal to 1. 0.5 into 3 is equal to 1.5. It gets cancelled, and we have B is equal to 10 to the power of 4 divided by 500, that is equal to 10,000 divided by 500. So that we have B is equal to 20 Tesla. Right? So the strength of the magnetic field in this case is given by 20 Tesla. Right? Thank you.